Hello and welcome to another episode of the Passing Through podcast. This is going to be another installment on a series of installments regarding Palestinian voices. And I have a very exciting guest for you today. So if you want to skip straight to the interview, feel free to fast forward to about 13 minutes and 30 seconds. Today's guest is Ashira Darwish. She is a Jerusalem-born, award-winning Palestinian journalist, activist, trauma survivor, and founder of Catharsis Holistic Healing. Ashira has been a TV and broadcast journalist for the past 15 years in Palestine, working with the BBC, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch. Last year, she produced and starred in the incredible documentary film Where Olive Trees Weep, which catalogues the struggle of Palestinian people living under Israeli occupation. I strongly encourage you to watch the movie. You can find it at whereolivetreesweep.com. It is a very moving, very insightful documentary featuring Ashira, featuring Dr. Gabor Mate, featuring Palestinian journalists and Palestinian people telling their stories. All of the proceeds for the film go to helping to plant olive trees in the region, which have been completely decimated. So just by watching the movie, you're helping to make a difference. You're not just raising awareness, but you are helping to restore a destroyed ecosystem in that region. You can find Ashira on Instagram at Prem Ashira. That's PREMASHIRA. Or on her website at ashirapremrachana.com. The links to all of these things will be in the show notes, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. But before I begin, I wanted to take a second to just say something. I'm college educated, yeah, but I'm not a scholar, I'm not a political theorist, I'm not a historian. I'm just a guy who lives in a van and records a comedy podcast that isn't even funny most of the time. I'm a human who wants to tell human stories, because to me, that's what the point of this life is. It's for us to connect to one another, to learn, to understand ourselves as a complex web of relationality to all the humans, plants, and animals and unseen forces around us. We are not individuals, we are dividuals. Each of us has a story to tell. We each have things to teach, things to learn. And one of the best ways that we can do that is by listening, by really listening to one another's stories. So back to the podcast. At the start here, I want to take a moment to note that different Palestinian voices convey different pieces of the lived Palestinian experience. Each voice has its own truth. This might sound obvious, but to me it's very important to listen and hear the stories of the people and feel their feelings. My goal here is to showcase different perspectives and present a more complete picture of the human experience. Because how else can we cultivate compassion or understanding? How else can we have a more holistic picture of others if we reduce their voices to a single narrative? We need to open ourselves to uncomfortable stories of abuse, torture, suffering, violence, pain, particularly when these feelings are fundamental to the experience of a given population. Because for 75 years, Palestinians have endured terrible atrocity under Israeli occupation. And more recently, over the past year, these tragedies have been broadcast daily to our phones and all across the internet. Depraved images of children being blown to pieces, or shot, or bombed, raped, imprisoned, orphaned, dying slowly while pinned and screaming in smoldering rubble, unable to escape. We've seen people in refugee camps crushed with bulldozers or burned alive in their tents. Living human beings thrown off of rooftops. Systematic bombing of hospitals and ambulances, the murdering of journalists and doctors, rampant and brazen extrajudicial killings. And just to illustrate the extent of the harm being inflicted on children right now, understand that Palestinian children make up the largest cohort of pediatric amputees in modern history. Now, there's a thorny question here that I think this episode's conversation touches on, which is, what is the best way for a people to resist? And perhaps more importantly, is violence ever justified? There seems to be a deep-rooted cognitive dissonance, or even an outright hypocrisy involved when it comes to the proclamations from the West. To many in the West, violent resistance is never acceptable. Unless, of course, you consider the American War of Independence, which founded the nation, or the American Civil War, or the French Revolution. And those are just a few examples from recent history. But if you look deeper to some of the cinematic cultural mythology of the West, epic films like Star Wars, for example, or Braveheart, the violent resistance of the rebels is lauded. Moviegoers clap and cheer when the Death Star is destroyed. In Braveheart, a film from the 90s about the English occupation of Scotland, the main character is portrayed as a hero as he makes an impassioned speech fighting for the country's freedom, where he says, "They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom." But why is it when black or brown-skinned people fight for the same thing, they're labeled terrorists? I think James Baldwin summarized it best back in 1969 when he said, "When any white man in the world says, 'Give me liberty or give me death,' the entire white world applauds. When a black man says exactly the same thing, he is judged a criminal and treated like one." So there's a clear double standard on display here. And now imagine this for a second. Try to put yourself in the shoes of a person who has watched the persecution of their people for decades, who has lost friends and family to colonial, state-sanctioned violence, who has been beaten, starved, imprisoned, attacked, oppressed, and dehumanized, and still, despite all of that, tried to peacefully protest. Imagine being that person and nothing changes. Instead, things seem to get worse. If you're that person, if you're those people, what other options do you have left at that point? Many Americans would, without giving it a second thought, happily shoot someone who invades their home or trespasses on their property. Yet these are the same people condemning violence and labeling aggression as terrorism. I'd invite you to think about why that might be. Why might nation-states and Western democracies want their citizens to believe violence is never acceptable? Might that make their populations more docile, more submissive, less threatening? Might it also do some of their work for them? For example, if people in LA can be divided into subgroups and condemned as rioters and looters, simple criminals and thieves, then we police ourselves for the state and help shape public opinion. And the state maintains its monopoly on violence. In this episode, you're going to hear about some disturbing things, some of which I've alluded to already. But you're going to hear about the harvesting of organs from Palestinian prisoners and Palestinian corpses. You're going to hear about Sde Taiman, the Israeli torture camp. You're going to hear from a Palestinian journalist about what it's like to live and work in Palestine. So I'd encourage you to sit with some uncomfortable images and reflect on the things that you hear. Feel free to even research them. Don't take my word for it. For this week's eco tip, I would encourage you to try an experiment, as the weather's getting colder now, to see how long you could stall turning the heat up to full at night. Just to experiment with what it might be like to just wear an extra shirt to bed, or sleep with a thicker pair of pajamas on, or a heavier pair of socks, so that you can use less energy and less electricity to heat the house. It's a small gesture, and it's not going to save the environment or really help avert any kind of climate catastrophe, but it will teach you where your boundaries are and what you need to be comfortable. And this is something that's important because a lot of us have become very accustomed to convenience, and we've forgotten what it's like to be a little bit uncomfortable. Make a small sacrifice. It's about the gesture. It's not about the impact, although making those kind of gestures, finding where your edge is, and beginning to expand that out into other aspects of your life, this could make an impact. So this is more of what we call in permaculture a sort of zone zero, which is you, your mental health, your spirituality. It's something that you can do to explore. And that kind of exploration is going to be important as we begin to adapt as a global people to rising temperatures, rising sea levels, water scarcity, energy crises. So getting more in touch with this can be helpful to you in the future. And it might save you a few dollars on your electric bill, which kind of sounds like a good thing. But yeah, as always, be good to one another. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next week or the week after. Okay, Ashira Darwish, welcome to the Passing Through podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So yeah, pretty immediately after speaking with you, I felt really great energy and a nice connection. And I, in general, love the way that you express yourself and the film that you produced and starred in, where olive trees weep. I just felt this really amazing kind of storytelling capability from you, and the emotionality and everything. And so I'm really happy that you're here. And I guess since time is limited, I wanted to just jump in a little bit into the movie.
My
And
baby's telling you, how dare you like talk to me without even introducing that there's a baby in the room? Like, what is this? So this is Yasin Ali, and he will be joining us. He's a 7-month-old.
this is the first time a baby has guested on the Passing Through podcast, so this is a special occasion. So yeah, like the movie was very powerful, and your performance in the movie, I mean, I shouldn't call it a performance, it's a documentary, but the stories that you told and the way that you told them, and what you do, the activism that you've done, the journalism that you've done in Palestine, all of this stuff is really just incredible to me. And I would like to just have you talk a little bit about that stuff, maybe what inspired you to be a journalist, what it was like growing up in Palestine under Israeli occupation, and these types of stories. I think they're important to tell.
Yeah. So growing up in Palestine was not fun. No, haram. It's fun. There's aspects of fun, but I mean, growing up under occupation means that you're always on fight flight mode. You're always waiting to see what comes next. There's no assurances of what is coming. And I think this is bad and good at the same time. It means that when people tell me like when did you feel the most alive? Well, I felt most alive living in Palestine because every day there could be something happening. So you need to like for me, it felt like I need to make sure to live every second and every moment as if it was the last, because you never know when something is going to happen, and to appreciate everything that you have and how much time you have in the land, because you don't know when they're going to take it away. But yeah, as a child, I loved living in Jerusalem. We spent very little times living in the old city of Jerusalem, but I loved it. I loved being able to see Al-Aqsa from the window of my room, to hear the church bells, the call for prayer, and to be able to have that as my playground. Because in our areas, especially the Muslim and Christian quarters, you don't have any open space at all. The only place that you have to escape or to go is either the church or the mosque, because they have the biggest space around them. And it's amazing to be in that energy. And now I appreciate it, of course, much more than I did when I was a kid. I also spent most of my childhood, because of my school was in Ramallah, so I spent a lot of time in Ramallah. And I love the air in Ramallah. I always used to tell my mom, like, the moment I cross the checkpoint into Ramallah, I can breathe better. And I think it was also just because it meant that the Israelis are one step further away from me.
Mm.
And every day there was something different. Nothing was, there was no stability. And I feel it like even right now, I'm much better when there's instability than stability. I don't know how to manage stability. I don't know how to deal with monotonous life. But yeah, it's definitely different than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of statistics right now. There's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of visuals and figures you hear thrown around regarding what's happening in Gaza. And for me, I
Yeah.
those things are important and we should talk about them, but what's almost more important is like the raw, embodied, experiential stories of people like yourself, because people don't connect to numbers. So this lived experience and what it's like, and the challenges and all of this type of stuff is I think of particular importance to talk about and for people to understand, because people relate to human stories, which is what was so great about the documentary. And your stories in particular of having insights into the inside of Israeli detention centers and torture chambers and these kind of things. It's I think a lot of people don't know, like even Sidi Taiman. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but
Yeah, stay Taiman.
people don't know about these places. These stories aren't told. You know, they don't get the coverage that other Israeli stories get covered in Western media. So yeah, like, would you be willing to talk about some of that stuff?
Of course. And I haven't been to State Iman, but I've heard the testimonies of those who came out, and it's so in the film we talk about Maskubiya, which is one of the torture chambers, but there's nothing like State Iman. It's it's being compared to Guantanamo, but I think it's still pretty much very different. It the way that the thing that describes it the most to me after visiting the concentration camps in Germany is concentration camps, because people are being killed inside State Iman. People are being tortured not for information, not for any specific reason, but for the aspect of torture. And that's what these concentration camps were. People were just being tortured, examined, their organs used and abused. And this is pretty much what's happening in State Haman. People are dying, and we don't know what Israel is taking and what's not taking, what kind of poisons they're using on these bodies, what kind of experiments they're doing, because Israel has a history of using, also stealing organs from Palestinian detainees and Palestinian martyrs, that they take their bodies and they never give back to their families. And then when a corpse is returned, we find that it doesn't have retinas, for example, and they've been taking organs from them. So and this is in the past. Right now, what Israel is doing is beyond anything that we have ever experienced as humans around the world, and we get to see it. We get to witness it. We get to. It's the most also gruesome genocide and most televised genocide. It's coming straight to people's phones. It's in their houses. It's in their homes, and it's still going on after a year, which tells us a lot about humanity and what humans are capable of. Because I used to always ask myself, like, how is it possible that the Holocaust took place? Like, how is it possible that 6 million people died and nobody moved, and they moved so late? And now I'm like, oh my God, we're capable of far worse things as humans. We're capable of being still and watch and witness as our brothers are being, like in Palestine, they don't have any more shroods, so they're picking people in and collecting their body parts and putting them in rice bags. And this is still going on. We're seeing hospitals like today, Kamal Udwan. There's no blood. People are dying with the simplest injuries because there's no way to cure them. There's no gauze, there's no alcohol, there's no anesthesia. People are being amputated without anesthesia. And everybody watches it as if it's a documentary, as if it's something so distant from them. And I don't know how this is going to affect all of us, because it's not only going to affect the Palestinians. On the long run, I think humanity itself is going to be shifting after this. Nothing is going to be the same. Because if you are allowed to do this to humans, this is going to be the case for everyone. You're not going to be able to say, oh, well, Russia doesn't have the right to do that in Ukraine. Well, really? Why doesn't Russia have the right to do this to the Ukrainians? Just as we witnessed Israel do it. And it's going to be, I don't know how we're going to live after. I honestly don't know how humanity is going to continue after this. And I don't know if humanity should continue after this, to be honest. Some part of me are like, it feels like everybody should suffer what has happened to the Gazans, and everybody should feel the wrath. And no one should be able to live normally after what has been done.
Yeah, that's a concern that I have as well, of like, how does this affect everyone? What does it mean for the world that this is just able to happen? And I mean, the Israelis' terror attack on Lebanon, putting explosives in consumer electronics.
Yeah, and people use their phones. Who's safe?
It's a very frightening prospect to think about that and understand how that can just happen, how your phone isn't even safe anymore. And maybe activists are targeted next, or journalists, or any type of group. Everyone has a phone for the most part.
They've already almost annihilated all of the journalists in Gaza, and the world also witnesses. Everybody who we used to think is a little bit more sacred, is a little bit more protected because of their status as doctors. They tortured doctors to death in State Haman. And they've killed doctors in State Haman. They killed journalists, targeted them, leaving nothing but a piece of arm or a piece of bone left to identify these journalists. They assassinated Shirin Abu Akleh in daylight while she was standing doing nothing. They murdered the Lebanese journalist on the border, Al Jazeera. They didn't leave anyone. Medical teams have been targeted, trying to go and save a young child stuck between corpses. Hind. The ambulance service that came to rescue her were targeted. There's nothing sacred and there's nothing protected in this world anymore. It's as if we're not humans, and they've dehumanized the Palestinians, of course, to a degree where the world witnesses it. But with our dehumanization, they're dehumanizing all of the humans on the earth, because then, as I said, everyone is next. There's no one who is safe in their home anymore after what Israel has done, whether you're Palestinian, whatever you are, because also what has been done to us will mean that there will be a reaction from the other side. And people shouldn't ask the Palestinians how they resist, why they resist, and what our revenge would look like after this, and after what we have witnessed being done to our children.
Yeah, this is actually a big topic. How to resist, what's appropriate, peace, nonviolence, militant action. And there's a lot of different opinions on this. And in the West, you generally hear people roundly condemn violent resistance.
Yeah, of course, they have the right to condemn violent resistance, but they don't condemn state terrorism.
Exactly.
They don't condemn genocide. but they're okay. They're so loud about asking the Palestinians not to resist. And I think one thing that's happened since this genocide is we don't care what the West says. They didn't stop the genocide. Nobody stopped the genocide. It's still ongoing. They have no right to tell us how and where and what is a fair response for the Palestinians. We've tried every method of nonviolent resistance written in any books of history. No one has tried nonviolent resistance such as the Palestinians. The Gazans, before they did October 7th, they did the March of Return for a year, where they were targeted, killed. Also, medics, journalists, women, children were all targeted by Israel when people were peacefully marching and protesting in front of the border fence that Israel stated. And nobody cared that they were trying to do the biggest move of popular resistance. So, why should people care? Why should we bother ourselves to even look and think about what the West says anymore? This veil of hypocrisy, we know very well now who the Human Rights Council stands for, what human international law. It only protects white skinned and Christian people. And that's all they care about. They don't care about if you're Muslim, black, brown, bodies don't matter to them. So if international law does not apply to us when we are being tortured and killed, it shouldn't apply to us in any way, and we shouldn't consider it when we think about resistance and revenge or whatever acts that the Palestinians will come up with after this, if we are still, remaining on this earth.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very strange thing for the West to be able to try to tell people who are under 75 years of this type of oppression how to resist.
And now pushing us to coexist. The best part is when you still have people telling me, I get asked all the time, do you still think there's a chance for coexistence? I'm like, would you coexist with Hitler? Would you coexist with the people who operated gas chambers in World War II? Why am I supposed to coexist with the people who are raping our men inside prisons and chanting and dancing after they do it and asking for more, asking for it to be state policy? Why is the standard for us different? Just because we're people of color? Just because we're indigenous? Just because we happen to be majority Muslim? Yeah, yes, tell them. You can protest too for all the babies out there.
I was actually curious about this specific topic because I know that you yourself were involved with the kinds of protests, and even when in your journalism, you taught yourself Hebrew, and you had kind of conversations to try to humanize Palestinians to Israelis. So I was curious what your perspective on all of this is now, if like you've changed your
Oh
perspective.
yeah, I've changed. This idea of trying to talk to them is gone.
Hmm.
I don't want to talk to any any Israeli left on my land, and I don't believe in a one-state solution anymore. I don't believe in any of this internet whatever I've been indoctrinated by the West to believe is right and correct because it failed us, and I don't have any respect anymore for international law, any respect for this concept of having to do the Gandhi way and do the Mandela style. We've done those, and I now, if there's anything I regret, it is I regret that ever believing that was the path. Because had we resisted and not even signed Oslo, had we not believed in any of these peaceful tactics that were given to us by the West so that we can be approved, then maybe Palestine wouldn't have gotten to a situation where they're strong enough to genocidally murder us, and we don't have any way of defending ourselves or standing back or pushing against this. If armed resistance was our only path, I think we would have had a much better chance in protecting our cities and towns. And you can see it also in what's happening in the West Bank, where the Palestinian Authority is collaborating with Israel. They created them and embedded them in our society so that they can protect the Israelis. And now the people are left with settlers coming in, burning them alive in their houses, no way to protect themselves. They gave up their arms to the Palestinian Authority, and they're just being slaughtered in silence. Whereas at least in Gaza they have some form of way to scream and shout with rockets at the time that they are being wiped out. Because Israel's agenda has always been the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. It didn't start today, it didn't start with October 7th, it started in 1948. And we should have been smarter in the way that we chose how to fight and how to resist. I think we should have never agreed to Oslo, we should have never agreed to ending the first intifada.
It's hard to even have something to reply to that, because when people are treated this way and pushed to this end, it's violent resistance is almost an inevitability at that point. You know, what is left at that point? So any surprise or any condemnations from the West or nations who have looked at the history and looked at what's happening right now and come to a different conclusion is a bit baffling to me. It's overwhelming for me to think about it, and you know, I can't even imagine what it's like for you, because I would imagine you still have family and friends there and people that you used to work with, and it's words seem to fail at this point, and I almost feel bad bringing this up now, and in hindsight, this is like maybe we could like lean into something else a little bit, and just because after the film was released, I guess you left Palestine.
Yeah.
And what was that like?
Just so I don't end up in State Iman, being tortured and separated from my baby.
Yeah, exactly. Like these were concerns that you had, I assume, after releasing the movie. You were a target
because they target people for posting on Facebook, and in Gaza they kill them, in the West Bank they torture them. So my choice was either that I take a risk like that, and my baby was just born in February, and I was like, it's too much of a risk to take. And it was so hard to be in Palestine during a genocide and not being able to speak, because in the West Bank and in 48, we're not allowed to open our mouths and dare say that something wrong, that we are being genocidally murdered, that we're surrounded by fascists. If you open your mouth, you get arrested, you get detained, you get tortured. If you don't, if you're lucky not to get killed. So I chose to come out and to at least be able to scream my lungs out and to show the world the film and to share it. And it's the only thing that I can do. I wish I could do more for my people right now being slaughtered, but there's not much. And I'm still also providing therapy and supporting people. But yeah, it's like putting a plaster on a gushing wound.
Yeah. The therapy was actually also something that I wanted to discuss, because there was a chilling observation in the film. You have Dr. Gabor Mate there talking about trauma. People are talking about PTSD. And there is this concept that there is no PTSD for people in Palestine. There is no post. People are in an ongoing state of trauma and stress there. So, like, for you, the modality that you've developed, can you talk a bit about it and what your experience is with it and what led you to work on this stuff?
So I started as being a journalist and leaving music behind and doing journalism after my first detention. And I moved into uh, healing because of my injury. I was lynched in the village of Nabi Saleh by Israeli soldiers, and my neck was broken, and I was paralyzed. And Western medicine had nothing to help, so I was looking for other options for healing. And that's when I kind of reached into all means possible, and all. What are you saying, buddy? And he's holding onto the computer. Come here. And that's when I was forced to look into the modalities of healing that are available to me. And I asked, alhamdulillah, for help from God, and I received a lot of messages, and I received a lot of help on how to self heal, from cleansing my pineal gland to doing so many holistic approaches, to also doing forgiveness work and forgiving the commander, because he was he was occupying my brain, and I was unable to heal until I released that anger. And after healing my body, I realized that was much easier than dealing and accepting that also there's a lot of trauma. And I started on the journey of healing from the trauma. And I used the same approach because I had tried talk therapy when I was detained, and it was hellish. It re-traumatized me, and it put me on a path of self-destruction, I would say, because I was blamed for a lot of things because of the way that the setup of the therapy was. And I didn't want to do any of that, so I started also looking for different modalities. And my lineage, my mother's side, is the name that I carry, which is Darwish, and there were Sufi whirlers, ancient. And somehow the lineage still had some of it was still in my DNA, and it was one of the things that saved me after my injury. And I found out that it was also changing the way that I can sit as somebody with ADHD. And I started doing more and more of that. And the more I did it, the more I was interested in actually doing the trauma work, because I was like, oh, it's not like I can sense that it's changing me. And throughout this journey of also going to Peru, doing ayahuasca for addictions, going to India, learning Osho active meditations and being in that community, and discovering Tantra, discovering all of these. I had a beautiful teacher, may his soul rest in peace, Kiratana Khalsa, who came and taught me Kundalini for 3 months, and specifically to work with children. And after that, he pushed me to start doing therapy. And I started with the children in the same village where I was injured, because I had a very strong bond with them, and they were as hyper as me. And I wanted to see if whatever I had to offer was can give them some peace. And I immediately felt that this is it. When I did the first workshop there, I was like, wow, this is what I want to be doing. I want to be able to help, rather than my journalism or human rights work. It wasn't helping anybody except following the agenda of the West and trying to appease them. I was able for once to actually do something that made a difference
Mm.
for people in their life. And that's how Catharsis Holistic Healing was born. And I started working with former child prisoners, and then women prisoners, political prisoners. And then we extended it to people who are living in places under threat of demolitions in Silwan, neighborhoods in East Jerusalem. And then moved it to Gaza, where I partnered with an organization there, and we started doing teacher trainings and training Palestinians in holistic approaches for trauma therapy. And I created the modality and was also sharing it with people and learning and building it also based on what I felt the need of the children was, and through interacting with the children there. So we've been growing and growing, and Dr. Gabor came to Palestine on an invitation to also work with the former prisoners, and that's how also the film gave birth. And now we're able to provide also free therapy to Palestinians, international activists, and people throughout this genocide who need the liberation psychology, and they don't need to sit through Western indoctrined therapists or therapy modalities. And we're also still working with the Palestinians who left Gaza and are in Egypt. And we're trying to work in Gaza, but in Gaza, the most important thing is to provide people with essentials. You can't go in there as people are getting killed and wiped out and have no clean water and talk about mental health. The priority right now is the survival of the people. And we're still working in the West Bank despite all the restrictions.
Thanks for sharing all that. It's amazing that that's something that you're able to offer on that scale and help that many people. And I can imagine the barrier right now, like you just described. People's basic needs aren't being met. How can you focus on healing when you can't eat, or you have no water or medicine? Yeah. You also just mentioned indigenous medicines. Is there an
Yeah.
analog in Palestinian culture or Sufi traditions for these types of journeying or?
We use a lot of za'atar. um, we don't have a psychedelic in a sense, but we have a lot of herbs. We have in the old city what we call attarin, herbalists, who provide remedies. And this is also one thing that I needed and used when I was injured because I didn't want to take any of the morphines, the Lyrica, all these steroids. My God, they wanted to pump me with steroids. And so I had to find alternatives. And the alternative was through combining Asian turmeric, the golden milk, with Palestinian herbs that were very helpful and potent for me. And I was capable of cutting the medication and just going through that. And since then, I've just been trying to avoid as much as possible to take any Western medications and to do, you know, ancestral. So I kind of feel that dabke is dabke is our traditional dancing is something that is very much engraved in healing. We have a lot of movement. So the Sufi whirling. We also have dhikr, and it comes from Islam, and it's reciting the names of the divine and also reciting verses from the Quran, and it changes the energy and the electricity in the body because the way you're moving your jaw and the way that you're enunciating all these words. And of course, it also has to do with the faith and the belief in these words that give it more power as well. And we have a lot of. It keeps, yeah. All right, I see. I'm going to give you your own cable to play with. Here you go. I was like that when I was a kid. I always wanted to touch electricity, and then I was electrified once, and I was like, oh, this is not fun. But I still asked my mom, I was like, I want to go study electricity. And they wouldn't let me because I was a girl in our culture. I was like, you can't come. The only school taught electricity was for boys only. And of course, here I am years later studying electricity in the body and doing energy and understanding that. So I kind of had it. I understood electricity is the way to go. Yeah, sorry, I lost myself. Where was I? We were talking herbs.
Yeah. We were just talking about healing modalities and indigenous medicines and
Yeah,
how herbs were helpful for you when you had this injury, and then this kind of like rhythmic speaking and reciting the Quran and how it
yeah,
creates a kind of state in the body electrically. And yeah, all that sounds amazing. And I like to also, raise awareness for people to know that these types of things exist and that there are non-Western ways to do
of
these things
course.
because
And they're the best way to go.
yeah,
The Western way to go is void of life. Everything, actually, everything. Since like I've traveled the world and now I'm here studying in the U.S. Everything Western is void of soul and life. It's unbelievable. However, they're like we always say like they're very cold in comparison to like Mediterranean people. And it's not only cold on the outside, it's like cold on the outside in the way they interact, and there's coldness in everything. So therapy is cold. You're not supposed to touch the therapy, the person you're treating. You're not supposed to show them warmth. You're not supposed to show them that you might have the same problem because you need to like always have superiority. There's
yes,
like such cold, weird ways of dealing with humans as if they're robots. And I think it's because many of the Europeans were robots or somehow um, we have, we have like a saying, soulless. And they want everybody else to be as soulless as they are. And this is why I think the Americans also, when they came to what they thought was India, stupid, they went into the most warm cultures of the natives, like very soulful people who speak to the plants, who speak to the animals before they kill them, and are so much connected to the earth and to everything around them. And they were shocked, of course,
yeah,
because they came from England. They came from these cold places where families have no connection, where tribes have been destroyed, where witches have been killed, and they came to these warm places where people still had love, and it was pure act of jealousy that they annihilated and genocidally decided to murder everything that's different to them because it had so much more soul than they can ever imagine and fathom. And I think it's the same thing with the Israelis. They try so hard to steal our hummus and make it hummus. They try to steal the falafel. They try to steal the traditional clothes because they have no culture, no warmth. Everything was taken away from them because initially they were never an actual nation living together. They were people with a religion scattered around the world. So you had Scandinavian Jews, you had German Jews, you had Russian, French, Ethiopian,
Polish.
Polish, every kind of Jew, but they had their identity was based on their nationality of where they were. And then when they created this fake state for them, they now all of a sudden had to like scramble and pretend to have an identity when in reality you have a million identities left in one, just as the US now right now scrambles and they create their Halloweens and they create their Thanksgiving. It's a world of fakeness from the get-go, soulless fake societies. And this is why they're okay with having people homeless in their streets. This is why they're okay with people starving to death. This is why they're okay with not having health care for everyone. If you don't have money, die. So who cares about you? Void, void, culture's void. And they have no problem with pharmaceuticals poisoning people's bodies, giving you injections, giving you medication. As long as they're paying for it, who cares? And
Yeah.
we in the Middle East, the third world, happy, soulful countries and cultures, were sold by this. You can see Arab countries like Dubai, the fake monster which they created, is very much similar to the whole concept of the West, and they try to worship the West and follow the West. You see in India how after years of colonization, people moved away from their magic, and they had soul magic. They have they have yoga, they have pranayama, they can heal people, and they have all these amazing tools, and all of a sudden you see them using Western medication and Western clothes and trying to be as Western as possible. It's 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 a fake world, and inshallah we will be able, after this destruction and this deluge, to go back to the authenticity and to respect and understand what our cultures carry and come with, and all the medicine that they had. Ayahuasca was used centuries to heal people from addiction, psychological problems, to actual physical illnesses and ailments. And now the whites discovered it, and now they have psychedelic schools, and they have all these places where you go in Amsterdam and you try the medicine and you sit in communion. And it's like fake white people still trying to steal people's culture without any respect to the land, without any respect to the medicine. And it's yani, oh, I don't know, I can rant about this and rage about it, but if you do have an ailment, if you do have an illness and you're listening to us, indigenous knowledge and medicine that's made for holistically, in a sense that you're not just a physical body,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
because
the
they
big
try to
part.
make us. Yeah,
The
that's the whole, that's the pick. If you want to sell people medicine, you have to tell them that they have no power.
yeah.
Because if you can self heal and your body has that power, and you have a soul that's connected to this body that's much bigger than just the body, then how's Big Pharma, how's Pfizer gonna make money?
Yeah, the thing that happened in the West, I mean so many things happen in the West, but a big component of the West is this kind of, me personally, I like animist traditions that, the world is alive. There are spirits in rivers and mountains and forests.
Yeah,
And if you kind of take that out and you make the world dead and you make people soulless, as you're describing, it allows for a lot of things to happen. It allows money to become the most important thing. It allows
exactly.
you to be marketed
Material.
to as though you're just a consumer of whatever they're selling. And the thing is that with those indigenous traditions, we are seen as energetic beings, right? Like we are porous, energetic beings where things
Yeah,
come in and go out. Some of those traditions are meant to help with not just physical illness, but like spirit possession and things like this, where Western medicine doesn't have anything to say about spirit possession. They'll put you in a mental institution if you're talking about
asylum.
spirit
Yeah,
possession.
that's the best way to deal with anything. And haram, I feel like I sometimes rob the West in the sense of Europe from some of the cultures. But if you look at the if you look historically at Europe, also it was taken away
Yeah, yeah,
through Catholicism. It was wiped out. The indigenous knowledge and the tribal wisdom was wiped out through the what do you call them, the inquisitions and all these ways of, and it was just always the rich wanting to get more and to get more power and to have control. Because how are you going to convince people to use mobile phones, right? If every person understood that the mobile phone that they have in their hand is has the cobalt, and this cobalt comes from a place called Congo. And for you to hold the phone, a woman gets raped. Every time you hold this phone and you look at it and you see that a woman was raped for it, how do you use it? You have to desensitize humans so that they can buy clothes that children have lost their fingers while weaving. You have to desensitize humans so that commercialism and consumerism and this capitalist globalized cancer can survive.
yeah.
And the more people wake up to this, the more we start combating it, the more we start fighting it, the more we can go back to roots, the more we can reinstate our roots if everything from us has been taken away. And only then do we have a chance for this humanity. Otherwise, this whole life is not. And I think the divine knows much better than we know. And this is why every now and then there's a whole shift, right? There's a tide that comes and takes the earth.
Yeah. I guess we're coming up on time, and I wanted to ask you just on this topic because we're talking now. You're in the States right now, right?
Yeah.
And where are you in the States? The West Coast?
Yes.
And did you choose that place for a particular reason? Because
Just because it's less cold than the east coast. I was trying to find a climate similar to that of home, and also in terms of modalities that I can, healing. But at the same time, it's like there's raging fires and angry earth underneath my feet
yes,
that I'm very much aware of, and I'm trying also to tap into indigenous communities here and the natives, so I can be of service also here and to learn as well humbly from them some things about what the time that's coming as well to all of us.
is there a community there that you have been working with or are excited to work with? I'm just wondering which.
Oh, I went to the so when I first landed, we drove from Boston to California, and I felt like an alien the whole time until I went and I did a workshop organized by this wonderful man called Dov in Mendocino Art Center, and they set it up in a farm called Dile, which is run by a Hawaiian and a woman from Pomo Nation. And it was the first moment that I felt at home. It was in their embrace that I felt home. It was in their blessing, in their songs that I felt acknowledged and seen and heard. And even though I was going to do the workshop, it was very healing for me to just be in their presence. And and just to when was it? A few days ago, it was Indigenous Day, so we went to Alcatraz to mark the Indigenous Day with the natives. And while they were chanting and we were screaming, we have very similar ways of chanting. And I felt also that that is my tribe, that is my home. And even though a lot of people ask me like, how could you come to the US? It's like the evil. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm in the belly of the beast. But in the belly of the beast lies the people who were also wiped out just like my people. And I think that it's important for me to be here and hear their stories and elevate also their voices and see how we can help each other as people and as indigenous people from across the world.
Hmm.
Woo! See my baby saying, "That's it, guys. You've been speaking for so long. I need some mama time now. You need some mama time." Yeah.
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 Thank you for your time today, Ashira. Um, can Can you
Here.
just before you go, can you tell people where they can find you?
They can find me on Instagram, Prem, Premashira, Prem Ashira, and my website is Ashira Prem Rachina. And there you can also find information on how to support Catharsis and donate so that we can keep doing this work and trauma therapy. And if you're a therapist or a healer and you follow the follow the holistic approaches, you can volunteer with us. And if you need therapy and support, if you're Palestinian, Lebanese, if you are of diaspora, if you are a Jewish activist for Palestine, if you're an international activist, we also support you with free therapy so that you can keep going on. And yeah, on Facebook, I don't really use that. I hate it. I
Yeah.
also don't like Meta, but that's the only way that I can get my voice heard. And I'm using Instagram until I find something else to migrate to.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for
Thank you.
bringing a guest with you. And
A little noisy, but it's gorgeous noises. Yeah, yeah, soon.
and thank you for your time. Thank you. Thank you.